Lando Norris is finally a Formula One world champion, but his toughest race didn't end in Abu Dhabi. It started there. Overnight, he went from fan favorite underdog to the man who has to prove every single weekend that 2025 wasn't a fluke. The British media now treat him like the next Hamilton. Oscar Piastri is no longer just a teammate. He's the teammate trying to take the crown off him. Every mistake becomes a meme, every interview a headline, every slow lap a question mark over his title. In today's video, we're not asking how Lando won the championship. We're asking a much harder question. Can he survive everything that comes after becoming world champion? Lando Norris is finally a Formula One world champion, but his hardest race didn't end under the Abu Dhabi lights. It quietly shifted into a completely different kind of battle the second he stepped out of the car. On paper, the story is perfect. Third place at Yas Marina, enough points to edge Max Verstappen and Oscar Piastri to the title, McLaren's first Drivers' Championship since 2008, and Norris becoming the 35th world champion in the sport's history. For the highlight reels, that's the ending. For Lando, it's the beginning of something much heavier, a life where every lap, every word, every facial expression is now filtered through a new label, world champion, and every person around him quietly raises the bar on what normal looks like. You could already feel that shift in the minutes after the race. When he parked the McLaren and climbed out, the first reaction was pure emotion. People trackside and in the paddock described him standing on top of the car with tears in his eyes, soaking in the noise. The orange shirts in the stands, the mechanic leaning over the cockpit with shaking hands because they all knew exactly what this meant. For him, for them, for McLaren. This was the kid who'd been labeled unlucky, too soft, too smiley, too nice to be ruthless enough. Now he was the one with the number one on his car next year. The hugs on the grid, the arm around his neck from his race engineer Will Joseph, the long embrace with his parents and girlfriend beneath the podium. All of it looked like the end of a long, tough journey. But if you watched closely, there was a moment, somewhere between the podium and the press conference, when the adrenaline dip began and the new reality started to kick in. The champagne dried off his overalls. The podium music stopped. The trophy, technically just the third-place race trophy, not the actual World Championship Cup, which sits at FIA events and in McLaren's trophy room, was taken away by staff. And as the other drivers filtered out of the cool-down room, Lando was diverted not to a party, but into the long corridor of cameras and microphones that every champion eventually has to walk through. He didn't rush it. That's who he is. While Max and Oscar wrapped up their main TV hits, Norris stayed. One more question in the media pen. One more stop with international broadcasters. One more conversation with a journalist who'd followed him since his junior days. Estimates from people on the ground said he was there almost an hour longer than the others, talking, smiling, repeating the same story in 10 different ways. By the time he finally reached the official post-race press conference, he was on his own, the only driver left on the stage. The cameras pointed just at him, the graphics behind his head updated to show World Champion. It didn't feel like a regular race debrief anymore. It felt like an introduction. That's the first hidden cost of this title. Lando's time has stopped belonging entirely to Lando. Before 2025, he could have a bad race, duck into the motorhome, take a breath, disappear into the sim, and come back out when he was ready. Now, every Sunday night is part celebration, part performance, part responsibility. When you're champion, silence is suspicious. If he jokes too much, someone will say he's not serious enough. If he looks drained, someone will say the pressure is getting to him. Every answer can be lifted into a headline. Every slightly ambiguous phrase can be turned into Norris sends warning to McLaren or Norris fires shot at Piastri, even if that was never his intention. The weight is multiplied by the fact that this isn't just any title for any team. This is McLaren's first Drivers' Championship since Lewis Hamilton's 2008 crown, ending a 17-year drought and the United Kingdom's first F1 world champion since Jenson Button in 2009, that instantly plugs Norris into a very specific story, the story of British heroes. Names like Clark, Stewart, Hunt, Mansell, Hill, Button, Hamilton, and now Norris are written side by side in articles and TV montages. On social media, people share graphics titled, "The New King of British Motorsport." It's an incredible honor, but it comes with a subtle, almost invisible shift. He is no longer being measured only against the 19 other drivers on the current grid. He is being measured against ghosts. In practice, that means this. When the 2026 season starts, a slow first 3 races will not just be a rough start, there'll be cause for debate. Was 2025 a perfect storm? Did McLaren nail one regulation cycle only to stumble at the next? Was Lando's campaign the mark of a future multiple champion, or the peak of a Button-style one-season masterpiece? That's the tension the British media will live on for months. They'll love you at the top, but they'll love questions even more. And no one gets more questions than the champion who represents an entire nation of motorsport fans still grieving the decline of the Hamilton era and desperate for something or someone new to believe in. All the while, just across the garage sits Oscar Piastri. This is where things get truly complicated. For years, Lando was the young lion at McLaren, the one chasing the Red Bulls and Mercedes, the plucky underdog with nothing to lose. 2025 changed that dynamic in the standings, but on the stopwatch, it stayed brutally close. Piastri's points, poles and wins last season painted the picture of a driver who's not satisfied being the other guy in papaya. You can call it a dream pairing from the outside, and for the team it is. But for Lando, it's also like defending a world title in your own living room with someone constantly checking your lap times on your own TV. Teammates in Formula One live in a very strange space. They share data, they share briefings, they exchange jokes, they sometimes share flights. They're also the only people on Earth who can genuinely say, "I had the same machinery you did today." That makes Piastri both Norris's closest ally and his most dangerous rival. The maths is cruel. If Oscar beats Lando across 2026, even by a handful of points, the discussions begin. Was the wrong McLaren driver champion? Did Piastri just need one more year to click? Should the team shift its development direction towards the Australian style? And those are just the polite conversations. Online, the language will be more brutal. And Lando, like every driver on the grid, will see at least some of it no matter how hard he tries not to. Inside the team, the expectations have grown teeth. Before this year, Zach Brown and McLaren could talk publicly about building back, about targeting wins, about taking the fight to Red Bull. They could celebrate P2 in the Constructors as a huge success. Now they walk into their own factory's boulevard and see a World Drivers' Championship celebration banner hanging from the roof. The walls are lined with photos from the Abu Dhabi night, Lando on the car, the orange wave in the grandstand, confetti exploding in Woking when he returned with the trophy. There is a line of employees who spent a decade rebuilding after the Alonso Honda years, now looking at their champion and thinking, "We're back! We have to stay back." Every major sponsor meeting, every internal debrief, every PowerPoint slide about targets for 2026 will now include words like defend, repeat, back to back. Nobody says it out loud, but everyone feels it. Second place is no longer a dream, it's a warning sign. That pressure trickles down. It lands on engineers who now have less room to take big risks. It lands on strategists who know that a single bad pit wall call in a tight championship fight can be brutal PR. And it lands hardest on the guy holding the steering wheel. Because even when he knows a decision came from the team, he'll be the face on the thumbnail when the video is titled, "How Norris Title Defense Fell Apart." And then there's the calendar. Fans think the off-season is a long break. It isn't. There is the FI prize-giving gala this year, in Tashkent, where Lando will finally be handed the actual World Championship trophy, smile for the cameras, shake hands with officials and fellow champions from other categories. There are sponsor tours, simulator days, aero meetings, winter training camps. There is the emotionally huge but physically draining return to McLaren HQ, already done, when hundreds of employees packed into the boulevard to clap him through like a guard of honor. He almost cried there too, trying to thank everyone in a short speech, knowing full well that most of the people in that room have been working anonymously for years just to give him a shot at this. He will get time for a short holiday, a quiet resort somewhere, maybe a ski trip, a handful of nights where his biggest decision is whether he wants dessert. But that rest will sit next to something he can't escape, the knowledge that the sport is changing under his feet. The 2026 regulations are coming. Lighter cars, new power units, active aero, no DRS, and nobody really knows what the pecking order will look like once that bomb goes off. McLaren nailed the current rule set. That does not automatically mean they will nail the next one. Lando Norris, defending champion or not, will still have to turn up to Bahrain 2026 with his stomach flipping slightly as he wonders if this new car feels like his car or a stranger. That's where the mental battle gets really real, because the question inside his head has already changed. For years it would have sounded something like, am I actually capable of becoming world champion, or am I the guy who just keeps coming close? That doubt fueled him, haunted him, and in 2025 he finally killed it. But now a new version creeps in, quieter, more dangerous. Was that my one perfect season? Can I really do that again? What if I never feel that unbeatable again? Those thoughts don't show up in the Netflix cut. They don't appear in neat motivational quotes. They sneak in when he's on the bike at the gym, halfway through an interval session, or when he's alone in a hotel room the night before the first test of the new year. The worst part is that there is no objective answer. You only find out by living another season with the entire world watching. And then, circling all of this like sharks around a boat, are the things he cannot control at all. Silly season rumors, driver market fantasies, and the constant sense in modern F1 that everything is temporary. We've already seen, on the other side of the grid, how even an apparently unbreakable partnership can start to wobble under the weight of politics, money, and power. Just look at how Red Bull's once rock-solid structure around Verstappen has been shaken by high-profile exits and internal changes. Lando's situation at McLaren is more stable right now, but the sports ecosystem is fluid. If a future regulation change shuffles the deck, if a mega offer appears from another factory team who hit gold with their concept, if McLaren endure a tough year or two, suddenly the story flips too. Should Norris move to chase a second title? For now, that's noise for another day. Today, his reality is simpler and more exhausting. Learning how to live as the focal point of a global racing program while still feeling like himself. He has to find a way to keep the things that made him Lando. The humor, the openness, the ability to admit vulnerability while growing the armor a champion sometimes needs just to get through the year. There will be Sundays next season where the car doesn't work, where strategy goes wrong, where Piastri stands on the top step and the British media ask him if the tide is turning. There will be Mondays where he has a sore neck from a tough race and still has to front a sponsor event with a camera 3 inches from his face. In those moments, Abu Dhabi 2025, the tears, the fireworks, the screaming radio message, the world champion mate, world champion in his ears, might feel very far away. But that's exactly why this next chapter is so compelling. We already know Lando Norris can win a title. That story is complete. The one we're about to watch is much rarer and much more telling. Can he carry the weight of that title? Can he navigate the media, the pressure, the teammate battle, the new rules, the expectations of a country and a legendary team, and come out the other side not just as the 2025 world champion, but as one of those names people mention in the same breath as Hamilton, Vettel, Alonso, drivers who didn't just climb the mountain once but learned how to live at the top. Maybe 2025 will be remembered as the glorious start of the Norris era. Maybe years from now, we'll look back and say, that was the first one, the night in Abu Dhabi when everything changed. Or maybe, and this is what makes sport brutal and beautiful, it will stand alone as the perfect season. Everything in his career bends around. The 1 year when car, team, form, luck, and mindset clicked in a way that never quite comes back in the same combination. Right now, we don't know. Lando doesn't know either. What we do know is this. The checkered flag in Abu Dhabi didn't mark the end of his story. It marked the start of a new race where his rivals aren't just Verstappen, Piastri, and Russell, but pressure, fatigue, expectations, history, and his own doubts. He's proven he can beat the field. Now we get to see if he can beat everything that comes after becoming world champion.